Part 2, The Industrial Organic Meal, page 127. The meal. Source, Whole Foods. Eaten at home in Berkeley, California. Menu. Mains. Roasted organic chicken, Rosie from Petaluma Poultry. Roasted organic vegetables, yellow potatoes, purple kale, and red winter squash from Cal Organics. Sides, steamed organic asparagus from Argentina, spring mix salad from Earthbound Farms. Dessert, organic ice cream from Stonyfield Farms, organic blackberries from Mexico. Chapter 10, Big Organic, page 129. Once upon a time. I'm certainly not the only one who has learned the truth about the industrial food chain. In recent years, more and more Americans have discovered the same sad facts. A lot of them are trying to get away from the kingdom of corn and processed foods by buying organic food. And in my part of the world, there is no greater temple to all things organic, natural, and unprocessed than my local Whole Foods supermarket. I confess that I really enjoy shopping at Whole Foods. It has some of the same feeling as browsing a good bookstore. Maybe that's because at Whole Foods I spend a lot of my time reading, not books, but labels. Every food item in the store seems to have a little story attached to it. Take the range-fed sirloin steak in the meat case. There's a flyer on the counter that says once upon a time the steak was part of a steer that spent its days living in beautiful places. Among the places the steer got to visit were high mountain meadows, thick aspen groves, and miles of sagebush-filled flats. Now, a steak like that has got to taste better than one without a story. You can bet it will cost more, too. These food stories are showing up everywhere. On a recent shopping trip, I filled my shopping cart with eggs from cage-free vegetarian hens, milk from cows that live free from unnecessary fear and distress, wild salmon caught by Native Americans in Yucatan, Alaska, population 833, heirloom tomatoes from Capay Valley Farm, $4.99 a pound, one of the early pioneers in the organic movement. The organic chicken I picked even had a name, Rosie. Rosie was a free-range chicken from Petaluma Poultry. Almost all the labels featured the word organic. 40 years ago, there was no such category as organic food. Today, it is a $20 billion business, the fastest-growing part of the food industry. The word organic has become a kind of shorthand for food that is healthier or more natural or chemical-free. Yet, as I had learned, organic has different meanings. Now, I had more questions than answers. For example, can there be such a thing as an organic TV dinner? What about an organic Twinkie? Exactly how different is organic food from industrial food? I was about to find out. The birth of organic food, page 131. Once upon a time, all food was organic. It was grown without the help of fossil fuels, pesticides, or chemical fertilizers. As we have seen, that all began to change about 50 years ago with the growth of the industrial food chain. One of the first to notice this change was a man named J.I. Rodal. In 1940, he started a magazine called Organic Gardening and Farming. In this magazine, Rodal wrote about the health benefits of growing food without synthetic chemicals, organically. But the idea of organic food did not really catch on until 1969. That year marked the height of the counterculture of the 1960s. Civil rights, the anti-war protests rocked the country. Young people were rebelling against a society they thought was violent, corrupt, and immoral. Some dropped out to join communes, groups of people living and working on farms. One part of this counterculture was the environmental movement. It was spurred in part by a 1960 book called Silent Spring by a woman named Rachel Carson. In it, she warned of the dangers of pesticides like DDT. Events in the news in 1969 also made people aware of the dangers of pollution. A giant oil spill off Santa Barbara blackened California's coastline. A river in Cleveland was so full of filth that it caught fire. Suddenly, people started using the word ecology and talking about cleaning up the planet. The first Earth Day was held in April 1970, and the idea of organic food began to catch on. Eating whole wheat bread and whole grains like brown rice became a symbol of the new movement. Processed food like white bread was called plastic food. The first organic food co-ops were founded. Neighbors would get together once a week and order organic vegetables from farmers. They had to agree on what to order. Often, they bought whatever the local farmers had to offer. The young people who founded these first co-ops, and the word organic meant more than a method of farming. It meant living in harmony with nature instead of trying to control it. It meant being free from the control of big corporations. Growing organic food was a way to live their principles and not just talk about them. Most of those food co-ops are gone now. Many of them have been driven out of the business by national organic supermarket chains like Whole Foods. Today, in the average supermarket, there's a selection of organic fruits and vegetables flown in from all over the world. You can buy your organics at any time of year, no matter the season. And you don't have to get a dozen other people to agree on what to buy. Industrial organic, page 133. But if you look a little closer, you'll see that something has been left behind. The organic food in stores like Whole Foods is organic because it is grown without chemical fertilizers or pesticides. Yet much of it is also industrial. Most organic vegetables in the U.S. are grown in large monoculture farms growing only one crop, far from the people who eat it. Most of it is processed and sold by the same industrial food chain as the corn from George Naylor's farm, because this food chain has elements of both. I call it industrial organic. For example, some organic milk comes from cows on small farms, but most organic milk comes from factory farms. The cows on these farms spend their time in a fenced lot eating organic grain, except for the 3 times a day they are hooked up to milking machines. Likewise, organic beef is often raised in organic feedlots. The cows are fed corn just like the cows in Pokey, but their feed is organic. The government rules about organic food allow companies to make organic high fructose corn syrup, words I never expected to see combined. This organic HFCS could come in useful when making organic processed foods like organic soda or organic TV dinners. I found one such TV dinner that included 31 ingredients, from guar and xanthan gum to natural grill flavor. Several of the ingredients were synthetic additives that are permitted under federal organic rules. Hippie food, page 134. The TV dinner was made by a company called Cascadian Farm. The story of Cascadian tells you a lot about the growth of the organic food movement and how it has changed. Cascadian started as a kind of hippie commune in 1972, founded by a fellow named Gene Kahn and his friends. Like other young people at the time, Kahn had the idea of getting back to the land and changing the American food system. Today, Cascadian is owned by General Mills, and Kahn is a General Mills vice president. Cascadian doesn't even grow its own food anymore. Instead, the company buys produce from large organic industrial farms, many of them monocultures. On the Cascadian package, there's a picture of a pretty little farm and the original commune. The place still exists, but it's for show. I guess so they can take photos of it. One overcast morning, Gene Kahn himself drove me out to see it, about 75 miles northeast of Seattle. We followed the twists of the Skagit River in his new forest green Lexus. His vanity license plates say organic. Kahn is a boyish-looking man in his 50s. He spoke without regret about the compromises he's made along the path from organic farmer to agribusiness executive. He explained that part of the idea behind Cascadian was to get folks to eat whole foods instead of processed foods. They wanted people to buy their food from local farmers instead of big corporations. But somewhere along the way, Kahn decided that it was impossible to make all of those changes. So he decided to focus on how food was grown. You have a choice of getting sad about that or moving on, he told me. We tried hard to build a cooperative community and a local food system, but at the end of the day, it wasn't successful. This is just lunch for most people. Just lunch. Agribusiness moves in, chapter 136. So Kahn, like some other organic farmers, started following the model of the industrial food chain. Cascadian started adding value to some of its foods by freezing berries or making them into jam. Once they started processing food, They discovered that they could make more money by buying produce from other farmers than by growing it themselves. The demand for organic food really jumped in the year 1990 after the Alar food scare. Alar was a chemical conventional growers sprayed on apples to help them ripen. In 1990, the Environmental Protection Agency found the Alar could cause cancer. Suddenly, the demand for organic apples and all sorts of organic produce shot through the roof. People who had never thought about organic food started buying it. Organic food companies saw their business boom overnight. Some, like Cascadian, borrowed money to increase their production. Having borrowed too much when the rush to buy organic food slowed down, Gene Kahn was forced to sell control of Cascadian to Welch's. The hippie commune was now under the control of corporate America. Other large agribusiness corporations started paying attention to organic food. It wasn't because they suddenly saw the error of their ways. They just recognized that a growing number of consumers wanted organic food, and they wanted a piece of the business. Gerber's, Heinz, Dole, ConAgra, and ADM all bought organic brands or started their own.